All right, I am pumped to be joined as we are every single week by the Hall of Famer John Smoltz. John, how are we doing this week?
Doing great. We're there. We're almost there. Playoffs.
Seriously, just over a week left of the season. It is go time. A lot of things happening still. The Shohei 50-50 watch, NL wild card, Tigers are making a push. A lot to look forward to before we even get to playoffs. But I want to start this week with what we have going on in the National League Rookie of the Year race. Not necessarily who you think is going to win. I'm going to ask you a bit of a different question. But Paul Skenes, 22 years old. Jackson Merrill, 21 years old. Jackson Chourio, 20 years old. John, if you're starting a franchise tomorrow and get your choice of Skenes, the starting pitcher, Merrill, the center fielder, Chourio, and the youngest of them all, a stud outfielder, who are you taking there?
Well, the easy answer would be taking a position player just because of the health and the problems in pitching. But I would be hard pressed to not take Skeens. I think he's such a difference maker. We'd have to find a way to keep him healthy, obviously, but
Yeah.
it would be hard. I mean, those guys you mentioned, the youth and the ability that those young position players have already contributed would be very tempting and tantalizing. But I'm still going to take a guy like Skeens because we haven't seen really, we've seen examples of pitchers like him, but we just haven't seen the consistency of it. So it would be a high risk
Yeah.
just because of a health concern, but I'm still going with him.
When you watch Paul Skenes pitch as a former pitcher yourself, you know all about what it takes to get your body right to pitch. Obviously, when you see Paul Skenes, he's throwing 100 to 103 as a starter. Naturally, the conversation comes up from people, well, there's a chance he gets hurt. There's always a chance he gets hurt. But when you watch him, what do you feel watching him? Do you see clean mechanics? Do you see a guy that can you think stay healthy? Or like when you watch Paul Skeens pitch, what do you think about his future?
I think the frame helps. His release point and repeating the mechanics help. He's got a unique routine of how he's developing his body and trying to get it ready for the torque and the velocity. I am a little concerned that 100 miles an hour is reached a little
Yeah.
too many times. I still think you can pitch at 95 to 98 and still have effectiveness, but that's a whole philosophy change. But I do think the size of and that he is helps. Look, I mean, I've seen some of his routines now, and he's definitely preparing for the torque that his body's going through when he goes downhill. I love the fact, I think we talked about it before. I love the fact he throws a football for his shoulder. He's not a straight over the top guy, which, again, is hard for hitters to hit, but also hard to stay healthy with that shoulder. So I do think he's clean enough in the mechanics that he could last longer than what the typical guy has been lasting since these phenoms have come out throwing 100 miles an hour.
What's some of the weirdest things, I guess, quote unquote, weird that you used to do? Or did you ever do anything weird warming up? Obviously, Paul Skeens with the water bags on his back and the football that you talked about. Did you ever try anything weird?
No, I did the old towel drill where you took the towel between your
Oh
two
yeah.
fingers to simulate, and that was probably the weirdest thing back then. But that was so you didn't have to release a baseball and put any more torque. I needed to warm up quick as a closer. I really didn't do it much as a starter. Pretty conventional as a starter. The one thing I started to do was warm up my body before I went out was just like a treadmill work or a bike work. I learned to kind of get my core temperature up, but there's some things done today, boy. I'm sure people are rolling over in their grave thinking that what does that have to do with pitching? But to each their own. And again, I wouldn't say anything if it was keeping people healthy. And we just need to find somebody that's not trying to reinvent the wheel, but understand the specifics of pitching so that we can train the body to last longer than it's doing. And we've discussed this, and it's going to take some rule changes to really change that.
Yeah.
But back to Skeens, I think he's got that capability to withstand the unnormal amount of velocity he's throwing.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Speaking of pitcher injuries, let's stick there and talk about Shohei Ohtani, who's recovering from his second elbow surgery, one Tommy John, one that we don't exactly know what it was or what they're calling it, but his second elbow surgery. His rehab's going well. It came out over the past week or so when Dave Roberts was asked about the possibility of Shohei pitching in the playoffs. And I immediately paused and thought, whoa, I mean, what a groundbreaking thing this would be if he comes back and pitches in the playoffs. What are your thoughts there? My personal opinion. Well, before I even tell you my personal opinion, what are your thoughts on the potential of Shohei making his comeback out of the bullpen in October?
I don't mind him making a comeback out of the bullpen, but I would not even come close to doing it. It would be a hard no for me. If he had done this in September and it got his feet wet and could understand, the bullpen has a lot different stresses on the body coming back from Tommy John. It's actually maybe a little bit more difficult because of the rampant weights that you have to get ready. But this is just not worth the risk, in my opinion, just because if you were to come back and let's say help your team in September in that role, it's one thing. The adrenaline rush is not quite the same as when you get in the postseason. And so I think with the investment they have and with all the resources they still have, it sounds nice, but I wouldn't even think about it. Look, Tommy John recipients, are taking way too long to come back because of what the science and basically the way that they're viewing this. So under that premise, just take a little more time and get them ready for next year.
Yeah, that's exactly my thoughts of, and it's literally what I said the other day. Postseason pitching, one inning is like 2 innings of the regular season, and every pitch is extremely amplified. And look, if you want to pitch for a long time to come, I don't know if he's going to be able to do what he's doing for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. I hope it's forever for the game of baseball, but who knows? But it just doesn't feel smart to me. And I'm not saying it'd be rushing back, but I went back to my brother rehabbing a couple of years ago, and it was right around this time. And the conversation became, well, do you push back and really push to be back for October and help the team there? And he opted to say, hey, I want to go into the offseason and be able to have a full offseason, to not rehab during an offseason, but treat it like it's normal and already have gone through the rehab. And with everything Shohei has in his future, I think it's a no-brainer, and I feel like he would do it if asked. I feel like it's a no-brainer to stay away.
Yeah, I think that's what they'll decide.
Yeah, I agree. But Dodgers pitching, on the other hand, John, what do you think about the Dodgers pitching? You got obviously Tyler Glasnow now done for the year. Kershaw injury. Buehler's been injured throughout the year, but back now. Bobby Miller has over a 10 ERA over the last couple of weeks. I mean, they have serious pitching concerns. If you're the Dodgers, I mean, what are you feeling like heading into October?
They better get one of the best two records. You normally wouldn't say that under a Dodgers payroll and roster, but right now the way they're built and because of the injuries, they really do need one of those two off. They got to have some off days, and they got to set up what they have available to give them the best chance to move on. If they have to go through a best of three, and then best of five, and then a best of seven, and then a best of seven, they're at a disadvantage based on the way that they're operating with their injuries. Their bullpen's good enough, but you know what? They did not expect this to be the case when they put their club together. There's no chance. And that's why they've kind of analyzed, we got to do some things different. They're still good enough, no doubt, but it's become a little bit harder if you don't have your frontline pitching in order.
Yeah, absolutely. Last one I want to ask you about this week, John, is Luis Arraez, who we just saw go through a stretch of 141 straight plate appearances without a strikeout. Insane. Longest stretch since Juan Pierre back in 2004. Longest Padres stretch since, you probably guessed this, Tony Gwynn did it 170 straight at bats. But what I want to ask you about Luis Arraez is we could be seeing his third straight batting title for three different teams. He's underpaid in terms of the stars around the game of baseball. He's completely changed the Padres season around. That trade changed their lineup around completely. So what do you think it is in the game of baseball currently to see a guy like him, in my opinion, underappreciated, underpaid compared to the stars of the game, going from one team to the next? When do we see players like Luis Arraez who are clearly making a difference? And if you were to say right now, if you want five players up at the plate with the game on the line. Who are they? Luis Arraez is going to be one of them. When do we see players like him truly appreciated around the game?
When the game starts rewarding them. Analytics doesn't think that is a viable winning formula to have a guy that just puts the ball in play with not an exit velocity that's sexy. And what they found is they've eliminated a lot of those hitters because they reward the other. If I can get rewarded striking out 200 times, him running into 40 home runs and hitting 210, which is pretty embarrassing, it becomes the norm. So it takes special performances like him to start changing the narrative. The rule changes will help, but that's the bottom line. I mean, I'm just telling you that's the reward system that baseball has fallen into, and you can't blame the player. But I sure love watching Arraez hit. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a treat watching him, and he struck out 2 games in a row over the past week, and it felt like I don't know. It felt like the world was ending there for a second. That's how rare it is. So I completely agree with you there, John. I appreciate you as always for joining us here, and means a ton, man. And talk to you next week.
You got it. Look forward to it.
All right. See you, John. All right. Just want to thank again John Smoltz for joining us here as he does every single week. And we really are just a few days away from the playoffs in October. There's a lot still to figure out here, especially on the National League side of things. But my Tigers in the American League, there's a lot going on there. So I'm pumped for the last week plus of the season. Thanks again, John Smoltz, for joining us. And the Skenes Merrill Chourio conversation to me is such an interesting one. And I went with Merrill when I talked about it earlier in the week, but it's really a tough discussion. And you can't disagree with him saying Skenes, who could clearly be a generational type pitcher. But we had a really long, great discussion about it on Tuesday's show if you want to go check that out. But as always, thank you all for listening. Make sure you subscribe, following, wherever you listen to your podcast. Wherever you watch, Flippin' Bats Pod is on YouTube there. We're on all social media as well, Flippin' Bats Pod. But really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe. Leave a 5-star review if you want. Comment on YouTube. It all really helps, really matters, and love talking with you guys in the comments and stuff. So really appreciate it. Until Tuesday, my friends, remember, find your bat and flip it. Peace.